Chapter 1 Nightly Night. In a dingy inn dripping with rain and choked with the scent of hunter's stew, in the middle of his first throw for the penultimate round of darts, His Royal Highness Prince Philip of Artwine, knighted the year before and skilled in all manner of princely things, missed the dart board entirely. Half the crowd groaned. A few threw copper rots at him. The coins clattered to the floor. Philip caught one, kissed it, and bowed to his opponent. A miller with suspiciously good aim and a good few years on him, she saluted him with her dart. "Losing isn't very knightly of you," she said, nodding to his purse, "though I hope you're chivalrous enough to pay up." Philip had eschewed the usual trappings of royalty, traveling with the nondescript crest of a lesser family on his clothes, but everyone in the inn had seen him arrive on horseback with his armor the day before. Only a knight could afford a cocher, and everyone had upped the bets on the games once he started playing. Fortunately, no one had connected him to Prince Philip yet. Portraits were rare in such a rural area, and his name was ordinary enough to get rouse suspicions. Nobles were more common than royals anyway. People expected knights. They didn't expect errant princes. "Have mercy," said Philip. "I sold my chivalry to afford dinner." Well, he was errant. "Oh, don't show him mercy," said a woman behind him, her familiar voice making him wince. "He loses nightly, so he should be used to it." Joanna, his squire for a year and friend for 3, had no respect for him at all, and that was how Philip preferred it. "I have half a mind to leave you here," he said, and glanced at her over his shoulder. "You have half of a mind?" She gasped and clutched her heart, full mouth in a completely believable O of shock. "I hadn't noticed." It was better to let Joanna think she had the proper upper hand. Tall and well-built, she could easily take him in a fight. She preferred camping, where she could write poetry aloud without anyone overhearing. But Philip had dragged them to the small village yesternight, after 2 weeks on the road. Her wet black hair was braided in a crown around her head, a sure sign she wasn't too angry about the detour. Not even Joanna would pass up a warm bath. "Stop letting him stall Maxine," shouted a woman near the door. She had thrashed at Philip at chess the night before and was walking the coin she'd won from him across her knuckles. "When so I could go home earlier and richer?" Maxine. Philip really had to start learning people's names before he lost to them. Blushed all the way up her ears. "Perhaps missing was a well-calculated move," he muttered, and faked a yawn. "She a friend of yours?" "Emma's friendly enough," mumbled Maxine. Philip had missed on purpose. People had been playing darts off and on all day, hustling him out of his money. Maxine was a fine opponent, but her hands started shaking the moment she noticed people were watching. When she realized Emma had joined the crowd, Maxine had practically forgotten what a dart was. Maybe if Maxine thought him tired, she wouldn't feel so pressured and would beat him outright. She threw her dart, and it struck one of the middle rings carved into the wall. 6 points, said Philip, picking up his next dart. He could hit the board's edge and still lose. "Whatever shall I do?" Maxine had bet 5 silver nobles on this game after watching him lose earlier. To Philip, the riches were nothing, and he was well aware of how unappealing that thought was. But what was the harm in his enjoying himself and Maxine's taking home some easy money and impressing her crush? His throw hit the edge of the board with a resounding thwack. Philip gasped like Joanna had. He had learned how to look contrite and disappointed ages ago. But sardonic hyperbole was far more fun. Emma applauded, and Maxine blushed. Philip hid his smile with another yawn. "Rematch tomorrow?" he asked Maxine. Sure. Confusion wrinkled across her face. But I figured all you knights had to prepare for the wedding, and that's only... In an instant, the comet ripped the happiness from him and replaced it with rage. I'm not that sort of knight, Philip snapped, even though he didn't mean to. The wedding was 26 days and 18 hours away, give or take some minutes, and he had no intention of arriving in the kingdom of Aldtor for it until absolutely necessary. Philip picked up his last dart, wished Maxine good luck with the rest of the tournament, and bet on her on his way to Joanna. He dropped onto the stool next to her. Lose again? She asked without looking. Her head was bowed over a thin book, a birthday gift from him, and her supper sat forgotten. She'd been scribbling in the book all year and refusing to let him see her latest work. Usually she read her newest poetry to him as they rode. Did you always dream of losing a coin in every corner of your kingdom as your great rebellion against your father? Philip smiled to himself. I don't think gambling counts as rebellion, but if you're offering... He didn't care about the lost pride or money. His fate had been set since he was a child. So what did losing or winning anything matter? For the first and final time in his life, he wasn't training to save Princess Aurora or even thinking about her. That was the entire point of this journey. Distraction. Keep your treasonous jokes away from me, said Joanna. Philip tapped the tip of her long nose with his stolen dart and tried to peek in the book. Isn't this better than standing around the castle in overly decorated armor and playing scumps? How are you ever going to write the next great epic if all we do is sit in the castle performing ceremonial duties? Most of those ceremonies require us to stand, she said, and angled the book away from him with a pointed look. So long as you're in one piece when I return you to His Majesty for the wedding, I don't care what you do. Philip shushed her and glanced around to make sure none of the remaining patrons were listening. Don't talk to me about the wedding, he whispered, getting his emotions under control. It wasn't even a real wedding. It was a way for King Hubert to join his family with his best friends, regardless of how Prince Philip and Princess Aurora, his betrothed, felt. Not that Philip knew her feelings, as he had only met her once when she was still a baby. No one's even heard from her or those fairies for 15 years, Philip said, each word drawn out from him like poison from a wound. Maybe there won't even be a wedding. Not being heard from is the point of hiding, Joanna said. Royals marry for business all the time, and you've known about your betrothal for ages. Why are you still acting shocked? Philip couldn't say it was because he had believed all those stories about true love, dragons, and knights in shining armor as a child, so he slumped and said, bitter words for such a romantic. Romance and realism aren't opposing forces, Joanna said, and scratched out a word that might have been slumber. Eat your food. I finished all of the celery for you. She gestured to the stew of mostly carrots next to her, and Philip smiled. His horse, Samson, would be so jealous. An act purely for my benefit, I'm sure, he said, and picked up the bowl. Also, if you're writing about the curse again, the door to the inn crashed open. 3 people flooded inside, blades dripping rainwater across the floor as they swung them about. A few folks screamed. Some brandished jugs or stools, and Philip set his bowl back on the table. Tell me this isn't a robbery, he said. Joanna closed her book. I'm hoping it will be more of a shakedown. You all do as he says. Leave your money on the tables and keep your hands in sight, and you'll live, said the tallest of the interlopers. They inclined their head to the one in the lead. He was short and silver-headed, the vicious look in his blue eyes twisting his handsome face. He pulled a knife from a loop on his belt and raised it at Emma, who had still been standing near the front door when he had burst through. You don't, he said, and she dies. Philip laid his stolen dart and both hands on the table, and Joanna tossed her purse next to his dart. The other two thieves collected everyone's money as the third one watched, his knife at Emma's throat. Two folks had grabbed Maxine by the arms and covered her mouth to hold her back. Philip eyed the two thieves as they took Joanna's money and left his dart. They slowly finished their round. Chasing after these thieves wouldn't be worth it. Neither Joanna nor he was ready for a fight. Their weapons and armor were in their room, and the night was thick with rain and fog. Philip could replace the money lost twice over. If Joanna and he tried to take down the three here without their supplies, they probably wouldn't lose, but a bystander might get hurt. "All right," said the oldest thief. He hemmed and hawed, looking like he'd expected more of a fight. "Well, we'll be going, and we'll be taking her for a little walk with us to ensure no one tries anything funny. Anyone follows, she dies." They vanished out the door with Emma, and the inn's occupants started talking frantically and peering out the shuttered windows. Maxine slumped against the people who had held her back. Philip picked up his supper. "Absolutely not," said Joanna. "We're giving chase." "They'll let her go, and then I can repay everyone," said Philip. "But what if they don't?" Philip shrugged. "You want to be the man who bet another's life on thieves being honest?" Joanna asked. "Because that's the epic I'll write about you if you don't help me." She flicked the back of his head. "And if you start throwing money at people, they'll know you're not an everyday knight." Philip sighed. It wasn't that he cared about what anyone else thought of him, but he cared about Joanna, and Emma had been a good sport when he arrived yesterday. He set everything down again. "Fine, but I'll follow them at a distance, and only intervene if they try to hurt her," he said, standing and stretching. "You go upstairs, grab our things, and follow me with Samson. Once they leave Emma, we can arrest them, if you insist. It would be easier and safer to round them up when they didn't have a hostage." "I do insist, but you can't go alone." "I am a knight, even if I don't always act like one," he said. "I know what I'm doing." Philip plunged weaponless and armorless into the dreary dark. Fog as thick as smoke coated the street outside, and the humidity left behind by the warm spring rain was cloying. Night had stained the lush woods surrounding the town a deep indigo, and clouds dimmed the little moonlight there was. A drizzle-soaked Philip crept along behind the thieves until he was close enough to intervene. The trees along the side of the road were the perfect hiding place. The shortest one, straight brown hair slicked back with rain, hesitated and glanced over their shoulder. "I don't think anyone's coming." Philip ducked down below a small wall along the path. "You told them not to," said Emma. "They don't want me dead." "Bully for you," muttered the third one. They wiped their red curls from their eyes. "Sire, what do we do?" "Keep walking," said Sire, who Philip assumed was the leader. "We stick to my plan." Sire kept the blade at the side of Emma's throat. He was comfortable wielding it, which was worrying. Less worrying was the red-headed thief's small crossbow, which they held like a venomous snake and had clearly never used before. The third one seemed completely baffled by the axe in their own hand. "You can't keep me forever," Emma said. Her hands were fists at her sides. "We must be far enough now." Sire smacked her with the flat of the knife. "You stop when I say you stop." Philip, not caring for Sire's nonchalance, darted off the path and looped wide to overtake them. The red-headed one must have heard him and fired off a shot. It tore harmlessly through the branches far to Philip's right, and he sank to his knees behind a bush. He had often played town guard and protector as a knight, but these were the oddest thieves he had ever encountered. "Why did you do that?" Sire tilted his head back and sighed. "You could have killed someone." The thief ducked instead of answering. Philip started to crawl toward the road, low enough to be out of sight. To his delight, Emma had shuffled out of Sire's reach. Philip stopped 2 strides away from the thief with the axe. "Do what I say," muttered Sire. Why is that so hard?" Lightning flashed overhead. Philip lunged, timing his step with the thunder. He crashed through the underbrush and flung his stolen dart at Sire's face. It struck the thief's left cheek, sending him sprawling with a shriek, and the other two spun to Philip. Philip tackled the one with the axe and kneed them hard in the side. They dropped the axe. He rose with it in hand. The thief with the crossbow fired off a shot with surprising accuracy, missing him by a hair. Philip knocked the crossbow aside with a sweep of the axe, and they stumbled back. Strides away, Sire struggled to his feet, and Emma raced back toward the inn. Philip slammed the handle of the axe into the crossbow thief's temple. They crumbled to the road. Lightning flashed again, and Philip lunged for Sire. With any luck, the others would surrender or scatter as soon as he and the money went down. Philip swung the axe at Sire. He moved with surprising speed, blocking the blow with his knife. The guard caught the axe's handle, and he nearly wrenched it from Philip's grasp. Philip twisted with the movement, his confidence flickering, and connected a kick with Sire's knees. Sire went down with a howl. That ought to have done it, but when Philip spun to face the other two thieves, they didn't run. One even laughed at Sire. Maybe Philip had misread this trio. "It would be best if you all surrendered," he said, adjusting his grip on the axe. One thief raised the crossbow, and the other lifted their fist. "Optimistic of you," Philip said to the one without a weapon, and twirled the axe. Joanna should have caught up with him by now. Philip was good, but he wasn't 3 versus 1 in the rain good. You know, if you took off running with the money right now and left well enough alone, I wouldn't stop you. Philip said it in a drawl, stifling his concern with false confidence. He shuffled backward and tried to lead Sire out of the middle of the road. Fog shrouded the inn from sight, but Philip didn't want the thieves to see Joanna coming in case that made them panic. The trees lining the road would provide some cover. Maybe he could even find a branch to wield as a weapon. "Run?" Sire stood, knife in hand, and stalked after Philip. "When you're the one alone?" A chill swept over Philip, the odd tingling of it starting in his chest and spreading throughout his body. He flexed his fingers, and grass twisted around Sire's ankles like a hand. Sire took a step forward, shaking off the grass. Philip shook his head. What had he seen? Sire attacked. Philip sidestepped, the knife tearing through his shirt. The crossbow twanged between him, and a bolt tore past his cheek. Desperate for cover, Philip dodged deeper into the tree line. A branch cracked above him and crashed to his feet. Philip snatched it up. A prickle like lightning raced across his skin. He had misjudged this. Like him, they didn't care about the money. Unlike him, they cared about winning. Sire slashed at Philip. Philip blocked the knife with the branch and swung the axe. Another crossbow bolt tore through the air next to his hand, making him drop the axe, and Philip stumbled. His back hit a tree. Philip pushed Sire aside with the branch. The third thief aimed their crossbow at Philip again. Hoofbeats pounded down the road. The thief turned, lowering their bow. Joanna, astride Samson and brandishing her sword, emerged from the fog and cleaved the crossbow in two. The thief dropped it and sprinted away. The second thief ran after them. Philip relaxed. "Took you long enough," he said. "Last-minute rescues make better poems, I assume." Joanna shushed him. "You're the one who took off without a weapon. The storm made it near impossible to find you. Mind of its own, I swear, but Emma made it back safely." Before he could respond, a knife sliced into his arm. Philip yelped, panic numbing the pain. Sire slammed into Philip and pinned him to the tree. His knife pressed into Philip's throat. and the fog smothered them until Philip could see only the murderous glare of Sire's blue eyes. The odd prickling sensation Philip had felt earlier returned to his fingers. Philip's skin broke beneath Sire's blade. "Get away from me!" Philip grunted, and as he struck out with his fist, so did a branch from the tree behind him. Both hit Sire square in the chest. The thief flew back, crashing through a sapling, and crumbled to the ground. Philip froze. Branches and grass twisted around Sire's throat and hands, binding him to the ground. As he struggled weakly against them, Joanna drew in a breath. "What's happening?" she asked, trying to calm the panicking horse. Philip took a deep breath. The vines holding Sire sank back into the earth. The fog around them dissipated, and the storm died down. Distantly, thunder cracked, and Philip shuddered. "I'm not sure," he said, and wiped his hands on his shirt. "Perhaps the wind—" "Philip, that looked like magic—" "Don't be ridiculous," snapped Philip. Philip's memories of magic were tinged with the brimstone stench of Maleficent's green smoke and the cackling call of her raven. Magic was rare, and he was besieged by a cursed betrothed, and strange dreams as it was. This was a fluke, a trick of the light. "We've been in odder fights before, and we have a job to finish," Philip said, but when he turned to where Sire had landed, the thief was gone. Philip squinted into the fog and barely made out Sire fleeing. "Never mind. If Emma's back safe, forget it. You pay everyone what was stolen from them out of my money, and I'll pack our things." "We're leaving?" Joanna asked, eyeing Sire. "I could get him." Samson snorted in agreement, but Philip patted his neck. "We need to leave as soon as possible to make it home before my father leaves for Altor," he said. "I want to talk to him." It was the only thing he could think of. His father would know of any reports of rogue magic or new magical deals, and he knew it would shut Joanna up. "Right. Because you wanting to see your father is perfectly normal," she muttered. "If you're sure." "Since when have I been sure of anything?" he asked. But really, he was scared. Magic wasn't supposed to show up in strange towns. It was dangerous and unpredictable, and it shouldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened. If it had, he only hoped his father knew why.